Hi, welcome to AI, Artificial Intelligence, and You. AI is the hottest thing in high tech today, and in terms of its impact on us, I think we could say things like it's just as important as the internet and the smartphone, which extended computing into every aspect of our personal life. I'd say it's as big as Google, which is currently on a mission to destroy the world's privacy. It's bigger than the social networks, again, in my opinion, who are busy working on destroying freedom of speech. And if some people are to be believed, AI's ultimate use will be to destroy humanity and get all of those idiots who like to glue themselves to sidewalks and precious art out of our hair. Let's assign a visual identity to AI. These days, everything seems to be about identity, gender, political, etc. So let's do the same thing for artificial intelligence, which, when you think of it, is kind of an amorphous concept. The most common visual avatar for AI is the robot. Now, on the left here on the screen, we have Alicia Vikander from Ex Machina, a truly excellent film, especially if you're into AI, since the entire premise of the film is based upon a very elaborate Turing test, a test for artificial intelligence, true artificial intelligence. And on the right, we have Alicia's forebear, her predecessor, as it were, the robot from Metropolis. I think there's a very strong resemblance between the two of these two. And if you've never seen Metropolis, even though it's a black and white and silent film, it's well worth your time. Hollywood, of course, has its own ideas about robots and what they should look like and how they should act. These are the robots from the remake of Battlestar Galactica, a really excellent series, though the guys from the 70s original series had better hair. You'll notice that there's been a development over the years to make robots increasingly human looking. And as a matter of fact, in Battlestar Galactica, there's no real difference, even at the genetic level, except for a few, needed diversions from humans and robots. Let's take a quick look at the other most common form of avatar representing AI, and that's of course HAL 9000 from the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. Uh, HAL is represented in the movie by this glowing red dot, which I have to say kind of reminds me of Sauron from Lord of the Rings. I don't know why. And HAL, of course, runs the ship, and his voice, that calm, methodical voice that you hear, has become almost iconic. He's not the only voice that takes over a movie in the world. If you've seen the movie Her, you'll notice that there's not even a glowing red dot to focus on, just your smartphone. We need to remember that technology takes steps over time. Remember that a computer once looked like this. That's a computer you're looking at. In the mid 20th century, women dominated computing in NASA's JPL labs. What she's working on is a slide rule, not a weapon to beat off the patriarchy. By the mid 70s, almost all the slide rules were gone. This is an IBM 360 setup, and I worked on Wall Street, I think in 1974 or 1975, as a TJ, a tape jockey, on a system very similar to this. I sometimes ended up typing in commands to that teletype machine you see that fellow banging away on. There's no CRT. Those didn't come into widespread use in computing until the late 70s, early 80s. Now, of course, We have computers that look like this, which is an interesting throwback to computers that never existed but that look like this. Everyone, when I was a kid, wanted to buy one of those devices, but they were never for sale. As a result, we've been living with AI for decades. I'm sure you've all seen these and used them. It's a spell checking system. In the 80s, spell checking was quite the thing, and people were absolutely amazed that you could do this in real time. You can only do it with primitive types of AI. Then came grammar correction, which was regarded as even more marvelous, though the first grammar correctors were available by the, I'd say, mid to late 80s, and they were decent for the time. And the lesson we can learn is that technology embeds itself in our everyday life deeper than we think, and we no longer think of it as a thing apart from us, even though it very much still is. Uh, I would just, as you think about this concept, remember Alexa and her various compadres who are penetrating into every aspect of our life. Okay, let's move along to where we really want to go, and that's to the road to really, really smart AI. The chat GPTs and the Lambdas and the large language models and all the rest of it. Okay, quick trip down AI memory lane. 1965, the first interactive computer, Eliza. She was intended to be a therapist online. She was quite successful for her time. By the way, if you want to explore the world of Eliza, she's still running. You can find her on the internet and sit down and get a session. I warn you, she tends to drive you crazy after using her a while, but it's an interesting look at how far we've gone. This is Sherdlu. I don't remember what Sherdlu stands for. It does stand for something. He's also available and online, and he's the first virtual world. It's kind of a Lego world, and you get to teach Sherdlu and then watch him learn how to pick up blocks and move them around. Here's 1968 and the introduction of the first chess playing program. No, the program was not played with real human beings walking around on a chessboard. This is a scene from a television series called The Prisoner. I think this is the most visionary television series ever created. It was actually developed by Patrick McGoohan, who passed away sadly several years ago. And I'm not sure which episode this is from. It might be the very first one, perhaps the general. The interesting thing about The Prisoner is it foresaw so many things that have come true. Didn't focus that much on AI because AI was sort of integrated into the entire show. One of the most interesting episodes was the one I just mentioned, The General, in which everyone is being taught to become a genius, but you're all taught the same thing and you learn the same thing. Fascinating series. In 68, the languages appeared, and this is where people thought AI was really going to take off. The first AI language was Lisp processor. Then came Prolog, programming logic, and these languages were designed to act as platforms for artificial brains. Um, I programmed in Prolog, never did much work with Lisp. And there were Prolog guys and Lisp advocates, and ne'er did the twain ever meet. Both languages had their advocates, but the result of both systems was we were going to end up, in theory, with sentient HAL 9000s. Now, there were skeptics in this period. And this is probably the most significant skeptic of the era, Herbert Dreyfus, passed away a few years. He's AI's bête noire. And if you haven't read either of these books, I urge you to put aside some time and read both of them because both of them are still relevant. Please remember that despite all the hullabaloo and excitement over AI, there are no intelligent computers as far as we know. None of them are sentient. None of them are self aware, though I'm starting to have my questions about that. I'll discuss that in a little bit. But both of these books were tremendously influential in, how shall we say, uh, a negative sense. In the early, no, not really, I would say by the late 60s, people started getting serious about artificial intelligence. And one of the first thrusts to create intelligent computers was to create intelligent computers that understood language, natural language processing. Now, everyone was thought we could develop effective machine translation by the mid 70s. A lot of time was spent on building these type of machines. The military and CIA, of course, were all in. Uh, but the estimates of how much computing power would be needed to create effective translation systems was way off. This is an era in which it costs $34 billion per terabyte of memory. And you just weren't going to be able to do much with language in that period with the type of money that you could afford, if you could even have bought the chips, which, by the way, you couldn't. Now, everyone was, of course, upset about the failure of the NLP projects, but with memory costing that much, people were not that surprised. It was, however, the second AI winter where Dreyfus's dark, malign influence began to really make itself felt in AI labs all over the world. The second AI winter begins in 1988 and starts um, with a bright, sunny spring blossoming in the early 80s. Memory has come down a great deal, though it's still pretty expensive. At that period, it's like $133 million per terabyte for storage. Um, but people are pretty clear with the languages that we're developing, with the work on new paradigms and new approaches to understanding thought and how it operates, that we were going to be able to create HAL 9000. It was only 20 years away, but if you had taken some betting men and put them in a room, it would have been like, 4 to 5 to 1 that we were going to create that intelligent computer by 2001. It didn't happen. It became clear by the late 1980s that even though we had some good game playing systems that sounded human, well, all you had to do was poke at them a little bit, and it became very clear that they were just trick boxes and that there was nothing alive there. It became a question of, I'm sorry, Hal. I'm sorry, Dave. I can't do that, nor will I be able to do so anytime soon. By the early 90s, the two companies that had been formed to cash in and start up in AI development and intelligent computers had gone out of business. Symbolics and Lisp machines. Everyone got very upset with all the money that had been sunk into all of this development. Everyone had gotten tired of nerds who promised HAL 9000 and gave you Dr. Nim, sort of cheap computer for kiddies. And the money went away. The companies sold their computers at fire sale prices. Some of them are collector's items these days. And AI advocates were told to go into a corner, wear a big dunce cap, and don't come back here until you have something real to show us, something that really knocks our socks off. Well, in 1997, AI had its revenge. In that year, IBM's Big Blue beat world champion Garry Kasparov. And the reason this made everyone in the AI business very happy was that Dreyfus had predicted that no computer would ever be developed that could beat a grandmaster of Kasparov's capabilities at chess. In 2011, the nerds from the AI labs became even happier because in that year on Jeopardy, IBM's Watson Jeopardy player beat the two best players in the world and did it easily. By the way, while Watson was learning how to uh, beat players at Jeopardy, it was also kicking the butt of Go players from Korea and Japan and shogi players, and it was demonstrating that not only had Dreyfus been wrong, he'd been very wrong. But then there was a serious setback for the nerds. You see, while IBM was cleaning the clocks of Soviet grandmasters, now no longer Soviet grandmasters, just everyday Russian chess geniuses, and showing everyday people who was boss at Jeopardy, the company decided to go into the doctor business. Well, sort of building a doctor business. After all, if they could, answer what was the capital of Albania faster than anyone else, maybe they'd also be able to do such things as cancer treatment regimens, diagnostic programs, do gene therapy analysis. And the idea behind all this was to take the best doctors of all time, uh, Dr. Kildare, Ben Case, Dr. House, I'm sure we all remember him, put them all in one, and come up with a new service that would allow you to take in people with different types of illnesses, treatment requirements, regimens, and service them and make a lot of money doing it. And to make it all the more feasible, finally hardware prices had become reasonable. From 3/4 of a billion per terabyte by 2022, I think, is when this system was first introduced. It was down to $14.30 a disk. Couldn't fail, right? Sure thing. It failed. It failed miserably. The systems they built, the diagnoses that were generated, the regimens that were prescribed, the gene analyses that were done, all had to be backed up and triple checked by humans. You weren't going to save any money with the artificial doctor house. Which brings us to an interesting question. Why, despite the two major AI failures of the 20th century, IBM's recent failure, creating a AI-driven diagnostic system and tool set, and by the way, IBM got out of the business in 2022, so we're not talking about 50 years ago. We're talking about something that happened the other day. Why is AI such a hot topic now? Well, one reason is it's become smarter and better. Here's an example from an attempt to create a haiku by three different computer systems, well, software systems. This is the 2018 version, this is the 2019 version, and this is 2023. And you'll notice that by 2023, you're able to get a system that can write a halfway decent haiku. And of course, the other reason is chatbots. Now, I was originally a bit puzzled by this because chatbots have been around for a while on websites. They're one of the most common ways to give you access to FAQs. And as you probably are aware, just about every FAQ chatbot you've ever encountered sucks. Most people hate chatbots because the damn FAQs never provide you useful, frequently asked questions, at least in my experience. Your experience may vary, okay? So, there's something about these chatbots that's really different these days, and that makes them really interesting, and that is they all talk. As a matter of fact, you can't shut them up sometimes. It's important to never forget that the goal of all workers in the AI movement and industry has always been to create self-aware, sentient systems. Everyone who works in the industry wants to one day be able to look up from their computer screen, from their smartphone, from their laptop, and scream into the darkening gloom over their workstation, "It's alive! It's alive!" Just to give you an idea of how desperate this desire is to create sentient, self-aware machines, I turn you to the curious case of Blake Lemoine from Google and LaMDA, which is their large language model, which is what chatbots are typically based on. Lemoine was assigned to, I guess, house sit, baby bottle feed. I'm not sure how you would describe his relationship with this particular chatbot. And over time, he became convinced that it was aware, that it was alive, that it was sentient, that it was actually thinking, that it had a soul, as he says. So convinced was Blake Lemoine that LaMDA was self-aware that he actually hired an attorney to fight for the chatbot's civil rights. Now, here's a confession I have to make. I'm not completely sure he's wrong. As I said, I've been involved in AI work basically at a hobbyist level, but I know what a Turing test is. I participated in them, and I've seen them being administered. And they're not very difficult to do. A Turing test consists of three people. By the way, to give credit to whom credit is due, Alan Turing, of course, is the developer of the Turing test. And the Turing test consists of a moderator and two entities that the moderator interacts with. They're asked a series of questions, and the moderator looks at their questions. And you're regarded to have passed the Turing test if the moderator is unable to tell which of the two respondents he's interacting with is a machine, and one of them is a machine, and the other is a human. And that's it. And I've had a chance to read the complete, well, not the complete, but as many as they put out there, transcriptions of LaMDA's conversations with Lemoine. And acting as a moderator, I could tell you that if I had not been aware of who was whom, I'm not sure I could have told you who was the machine and who wasn't. The ability of LaMDA to what I would regard as almost transcend certain traditional limits of what a machine can do in terms of its conversation and interaction with a human being was incredibly impressive. I do have to say that if we're going to be doing Turing tests in the future, and we will be, they're going to have to be more sophisticated and more thought through than the ones that we're currently using. Okay, let's move on to a more important topic here. Us, writers, that is. A lot of people are trying to sell a lot of us tools and systems and aids that are supposed to make us better, more efficient, and more productive writers. I'll be honest with you, I'm very skeptical. I don't believe Jackson is as skeptical as I am, but I'll let him speak for himself on this one. Now, these are the areas in which I've been hearing that people are using ChatGPT. I myself have not used any of these tools very much. I have studied them. I have learned how to use them. I have been testing them. I'm not sure I'm convinced they're very useful in certain areas. I'm extremely skeptical that these things can rewrite a story to be better, unless you're such a poor writer that you need people to rewrite it to be better and to thus teach you how to write. I mean, here are the big ones. Storyline aid, brainstorming. What happens next? Okay, that can happen. That can be done. That can be useful. I mean, if it's doing it for you, it's a generative AI, right? They're supposed to be able to write for you. They write, if you ask them questions, they write back at you. And you go, well, what could happen next? You could get a listing of things, and it's quite possible you might miss something that you didn't think of. You'll think of it eventually, but if it does it then, okay, time saved. Character development. This description, motivation, names. Okay. Interesting characters are hard to develop. I have not seen any system that develops interesting characters. NPCs, non-player character type personalities and disposable, chud chud feed for the bad guy with the giant katana and the transformer that tears off Tokyo. Okay, editing. Actually, I think this is where I have the most interest in these systems, and that is editing, specifically copy editing. I cover that on the next slide, but I don't know about you, but if I find an AI that does a good job, a decent job of being a good copywriter, a copy editor, I'm sold. I hate copy editing. Most of us do. So I think that's one of the greatest potential sources of value. The only trouble is I've used a couple of these systems of copy editors, and they're wildly inconsistent. Sometimes they do a great job, sometimes they're just not. Okay, and what about and of course, this takes us to the question I just asked. Are they of any use? By the way, if any of you have used these as copy editors, greatly appreciate hearing from you. We've got contact information all around this presentation. Basic editing. Yeah, I could see how you could do basic editing, but things like a serious change in language, um, the ability to how be arch or satirical or sly the way that a good writer can create in a character. Not convinced. Humor, satire. I already know this. These systems are not good at creating satire. They especially suck at satire, and I know this because I write satire. One of my novels, Steve Jobs' Liver, is a satirical novel. Takes place in the high-tech industry. Yes, it deals with an AI, a resurrected Steve Jobs, and I think it's got a lot of funny lines in it. If I say so myself, I asked the system, ChatGPT 3.5, to rewrite it to be satirical. Not useful. I'll be trying out 4.0 soon. Rewrite in tone to meet genre standards. I'm not big on genre standards, but if you are, well, good question. And can this thing recreate the works of famous authors? Um, Jackson and I first got involved with one another when he sent me a sample of some of Jane Austen's work. Jane Austen is my favorite author. And I took one look at the stuff, read through it, and said, this doesn't sound like Jane Austen's idiot younger sister. Never mind Jane Austen.